Today we are going to discuss the RCOG guideline about preterm pre-labor rupture of membranes from 24 weeks of gestation. This guideline was published in June 2019. Okay, so what are the important features of this guideline? Okay, first of all, let us discuss the key recommendation in this guideline. Okay, the diagnosis of spontaneous rupture of membrane is made by maternal history followed by sterile speculum examination. Okay, so first of all, once the mother gave proper history, we have to do proper speculum examination. Okay, and if on speculum examination no amniotic fluid is observed, then clinician should consider performing an insulin-like growth factor binding protein 1, IGFB, BP1 or placental alpha microglobulin 1 test of vaginal fluid to guide further management. This is something new in this guideline. Okay, following the diagnosis of preterm pre-labor rupture of membrane, an antibiotic is given, preferably erythromycin, which is given for 10 days or until the woman is in established labor. Okay, and women who have PPROM between 24 to 33 plus 6 weeks of gestation should be offered corticosteroids, and that can be considered up to 35 plus 6 weeks of gestation. Okay, another thing is that in a combination of clinical assessment, maternal blood test, C-reactive protein, white cells, and fetal heart rate should be used to diagnose chorioamnionitis in a woman with PPROM. These parameters should not be used in isolation. Okay, so whenever we suspect the chorioamnionitis in a woman, okay, we can't make our assessment based upon one thing. Okay, first of all, proper clinical assessment after asking proper history and doing examination, and then after doing maternal test and which show the inflammatory markers evidence like C-reactive protein and white cells count, and then fetal heart rate, which we have checked. All these things will help us in diagnosis of chorioamnionitis, because diagnosis of chorioamnionitis will help us in making the proper management plan. Okay, another thing is that women whose pregnancy is complicated by PPROM after 24 plus weeks of gestation, who have no contraindication to continuing pregnancy, should be offered expected management until the 37 plus weeks of gestation. Timing of the birth should be discussed with each woman on an individual basis with a careful consideration of the patient preference and ongoing assessment. So these points are very important. Okay, another thing is that in women who have PPROM and are in established labor or have planned preterm within 24 or intravenous magnesium sulfate should be offered between 24 to 29 plus 6 weeks of gestation. So it's very important that magnesium sulfate is offered to those women in whom the delivery is expected within 24 hours. Okay, now coming to the background and scope in which some important information is written. First of all, a very important percentage is written that preterm pre-labor rupture of membrane complicates about 3% of pregnancy and is associated with 30 to 40% of the preterm births. 3% of pregnancies are complicated and 30 to 40% preterm births are affected. Okay, now what are the complications associated with it? Okay, PPROM can result in significant neonatal morbidity and mortality, primarily from prematurity, sepsis, cord prolapse, pulmonary hypoplasia. Okay, so these are the complications. In addition, there are risks associated with the chorioamnionitis and placental abruption. So we have to remember all these complications of the PPROM. Okay, now the median latency after PPROM is 7 days and tends to shorten as gestational age as the PPROM advances. Now coming to the point 4 of this guideline, which is the diagnosis. Okay, about this it's written that how is the PPROM diagnosis made. Okay, so how is the PPROM diagnosis made? Okay, about this it's written that the diagnosis of spontaneous rupture of membrane is made by maternal history followed by sterile speculum examination demonstrating a LICR. And if on speculum examination no amniotic fluid is observed, clinician should consider performing insulin-like growth factor binding protein 1 or placenta alpha microglobulin 1 test of vaginal fluid to guide further management. Okay, and the role of ultrasound assessment of amniotic fluid is unclear because sometimes the patient with polycums and amniotic fluid might be normal, so that will not give us an exact idea whether she has got PPROM or not. Okay, so it's written that the presence of pool of amniotic fluid in the vagina at the sterile speculum examination is highly suggestive of membrane rupture, and when this is clearly observed, no further diagnostic tests are required. And some clinicians recommend that woman lies flat on in left lateral for a period of time before the speculum examination to allow amniotic fluid to accumulate, and although no evidence was identified to support these practices. Based on the clinical evaluation, the diagnosis of PPROM can be equivocal in 10 to 20% of the cases. When a pool of amniotic fluid is not clearly observed, consideration should be given to the testing of insulin-like growth factor binding protein 1 or placental alpha microglobulin 1 if these tests are available. Okay, usually these tests are not available. Okay, and several studies are needed to be done. Okay, now coming to the other points. Testing for nitrazine is not recommended, and no further tests are required if the woman is in established labor. Okay, and another thing is that, is there any role of ultrasound in PPROM? Okay, no studies were identified specifically addressing the ultrasound to determine the amniotic fluid volumes in the woman presenting with suspected PPROM, and ultrasound examination demonstrating oligohydramnion may be useful to support the clinical diagnosis of PPROM. So just for supporting the diagnosis, not for confirmed diagnosis. What to do if PPROM is not confirmed? If PPROM is not confirmed, the woman can return to her previous schedule of antenatal care. Okay, now coming toward the assessment. Okay, what is required antenatally to identify infection? It's written that a combination of the clinical assessment, maternal blood tests like C-reactive protein and white cells, and fetal heart rate should be used to diagnose the chorioamnionitis in women with a PPROM, and these parameters should not be used in isolation. Okay, and women should be advised of and observed for the symptoms of clinical chorioamnionitis like lower abdominal pain, abnormal vaginal discharge, fever, malaise, and reduced fetal movements. Okay, so these are required antenatally to identify infection. Okay, and next is written that one of the risks associated with PPROM is ascending infection leading to chorioamnionitis and subsequent fetal and neonatal infection. So NICE guidelines recommend that combination of the clinical assessment should be employed to diagnose clinical infection. If the result of the clinical assessment or any of these tests are not considered, okay, if the results of the clinical assessment or any of the tests are not consistent with each other, it is recommended that women should continue to be observed and consideration should be given to repeating tests as per NICE guideline. Okay, about the white cells, it is written that white cell count will rise 24 hours following administration of corticosteroid and should return to the baseline 3 days following administration. And while a study investigating several maternal serum markers for predicting histological chorioamnionitis after PPROM concluded that a raised C-reactive protein was most informative, and systemic review and meta-analysis of 13 observational studies found that C-reactive protein has sensitivity of 68.7% and specificity of 77.1% in diagnosing histological chorioamnionitis. Okay, in another paragraph, the same thing is written that when we try to identify chorioamnionitis in these women, then we have to do proper clinical assessment and the blood test, which I have discussed before. So coming to the point 2, which is should neonatologists be involved in the women care? It's written that neonatologists should be informed when the diagnosis of PPROM is confirmed and delivery is anticipated, and women with a PPROM should have opportunity to meet with a neonatologist antenatally to discuss the baby's care. Okay, about the explanation, it is written that PPROM is associated with increased perinatal morbidity and mortality infertility and often leads to the preterm births, and so neonatologists should be informed once the diagnosis of PPROM has been made and delivery is anticipated to ensure that neonatal unit has appropriate staff and facility to care for the neonate should the delivery occur. Come to the management. Okay, should antibiotics be given? About this it's written here, yes, erythromycin should be given. Erythromycin should be given for 10 days following the diagnosis of PPROM or until the woman is in established labor. And different studies have shown that the use of antibiotic is associated with statistically significant reduction in chorioamnionitis. Now, what is the role of antenatal corticosteroid? Okay, about this is just written. Okay, in a woman who have PPROM from 24 plus weeks of gestation, antenatal corticosteroid should be given. Okay, it should be offered between 24 to 25 plus 6 weeks of gestation, 2 plus evidence offered between 26 to 33 plus weeks of gestation, 1 plus evidence, and consideration between 34 and 35 plus weeks of gestation, 1 plus evidence. And the different studies which were conducted showed that administration of corticosteroid to the woman with PPROM reduces the risk of respiratory distress syndrome and intraventricular hemorrhage both. Okay, now coming to the last point of this page, it's written that the NICE guideline recommends that a repeat course of corticosteroid should not be routinely offered, but the interval since the last course, gestation age, and the likelihood of birth in the next 48 hours should be taken into consideration. Now, what is the role of magnesium sulfate for neuroprotection of a baby? About this, it's written that in women who have PPROM and are in established labor or have repeated preterm birth within 24 hours, intravenous magnesium sulfate should be offered between 24 and 29 weeks of gestation. And this is for the neuroprotection. Now, what is the role of tocolysis? Should tocolytic agent be used? It's written that tocolysis in the woman with PPROM is not recommended. Okay, and about explanation, it is written that tocolysis was associated with increased risk of 5-minute Apgar score of less than 7 and increased need for the ventilation support. Now, can the woman be monitored at home? Okay, about this it's written that decision to offer outpatient care to the woman with PPROM should be made on individual basis, taking into account the markers of delivery latency. Okay, and the optimum method of monitoring to predict adverse fetal outcome after PPROM has not been determined. Now, coming to the point 6.6, it's written that is there any role for amnioinfusion in PPROM? Okay, about this it's written that in PPROM, amnioinfusion is not recommended as a part of routine clinical practice. And in explanation, it is written that amnioinfusion might improve neonatal outcome in PPROM by preventing umbilical cord compression, postural deformities, pulmonary hypoplasia, and intrauterine infection. Okay, but in the end of this paragraph, it's written that the further evidence is required before amnioinfusion is recommended for PPROM. Okay, and should the woman with the PPROM be offered emotional support? Yes, women with the PPROM and their partners should be offered additional emotional support during pregnancy and postnatally. Now, coming to the birth. Okay, when is the appropriate time to deliver the baby? Okay, women with whose pregnancy is complicated by PPROM after 24 plus weeks of gestation and who have no contraindication to continuing the pregnancy should be offered expectant management until 37 plus weeks, and timing of the birth should be discussed with each woman on an individual basis with careful consideration of the patient preferences and ongoing clinical assessment. And the care of women with PPROM who are known to be colonized with a group B streptococcus is addressed in a GTG 36. Okay, now come to point number 8. Care in a subsequent pregnancy following PPROM. Now, who should care for women in subsequent pregnancy? About this, it's written that in subsequent pregnancy following PPROM, women should be cared for by an obstetrician with an interest in the preterm birth. Okay, coming to the last paragraph, in the pregnancies following PPROM, women should be cared for an obstetrician with interest in the preterm birth. Ideally, this would be in dedicated preterm labor clinic. Modifiable risk factors such as smoking, respiratory diseases should be addressed, and there is evidence that screening for the the lower gender tract infection and midwife continuity throughout the antenatal care are beneficial in preventing preterm births, and clinician may offer these women's genital tract screening for infection or serial TVS scans to determine the cervical length, but the evidence to support these interventions is lacking. So this is all about the PPROM guideline of RCOG published in 2019. Thank you so much for your patience.